There's representation, and I think there's healthy representation of marginalized groups. And I think sometimes it's not always done the greatest. Are you handling these identities with care in trying to create a healthy normalization of these groups of people?
I'm not thinking about them as like gay vampires. They're just vampires who happen to be gay.
Exactly.
Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast. My name is Esther.
And I'm Adrian.
And today, we have just finished watching Interview with the Vampire Season 2, Episode 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, I remember somebody in the comments when we were like talking about watching 2 episodes at a time, somebody did warn us and they said we should watch episode 5 by itself.
Yeah.
And after watching the episode, sorry that we did not listen to your advice, but here we are. Let's dive in.
Bruh.
So episode 4 opens with Claudia's first I don't know if it's her first performance, but it opens with her performance, our first time seeing her performance as Lulu the bird or whatever, the baby
Dear
bird.
God. Ugh.
I don't know if I'm reaching with this, but it reminded me of minstrel shows.
I could see that.
You know, like the infantilizing. Yes. And like, I don't think that, let me be clear, because sometimes people like to jump to conclusions. I don't think that it was a minstrel show, and I don't even necessarily think that within the framing of the show it was racist. But I do think that it is like referencing similar themes of like infantilization of Black people.
Yes.
And also like this glossing over of like actually like horrific circumstances and violence. In this case, like the glossing over of vampirism, but even within the context of the play itself, right? Like she breaks her leg, she, you know, whatever, and it's all supposed to be like hee hee ha ha funny. That is very reminiscent of minstrel shows and like the type of content they would have and their purpose, which was to be a distraction from the insidiousness of racism.
Yeah.
I thought about that a lot.
And it was just, it felt very degrading.
Yes.
Felt very microaggressive. You're like, oh, you're going to be you're going to be their little bird forever, which is like, you know, that's a grown woman. I don't know how you would ever describe it. And I do find it telling that like Louis, who happens to be the only other Black person, seems to be the only one uncomfortable.
Yeah, he didn't think it was funny.
No. Yeah. And all those white people are laughing at Claudia, who happened to be a Black woman in their mind. I don't know, bro. That felt weird. The entire time, I didn't even know what to write. This is what I put. This is demoralizing. Those are my notes. I'm like, this is like, what are we doing here? Like, propping up this Black girl, putting her on display and making fun of her pain and violence as like a humorous way. Like they're taking a hammer and nailing it in Claudia's foot. Like, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Now, to be fair, in all of the plays, there was always this kind of absurdity and like it was like sort of darkly violent, but in a silly way. Mm-hmm. So it's not like her performance is necessarily different, I don't think, from the rest of the plays in the show. But because of her lived reality, as the viewer, you just receive it much differently.
Yeah.
I think that many times filmmakers understand the implications of their casting. Yeah. And they are not shying away from that reality in their story. Even if it is not, they're not trying to be like, and the Théâtre des Vampires. That was my French.
That was your, whoa, okay. You want to try that never again?
And the Théâtre des Vampires.
Oh, we did it again.
I have to get the whole sentence out.
Got it.
I have to do the third time.
Okay.
They're not trying to be like the Théâtre des Vampires.
I'm not entirely sure what's happening right now.
They're not trying to say like the theater of vampires was racist, but I think that they are aware that we will pick up on the racial undertones of what is happening. Yeah. And that it impacts our experience. I just want to make that clear because some people get really upset when they feel like we're doing too much with the race stuff.
Guys, I don't know what to tell you. Just, this may not be the right channel for you. I'm sorry.
I just thought it was very interesting juxtaposing Claudia's phase of life that she's in this episode. Yeah. Where, you know, in the past couple episodes, it was like she was on this high. She was feeling like she had finally found everything that she was looking for. And then in this episode, you kind of see just like a sharp contrast from that, where obviously she's extremely unhappy with her role. It's not all that she thought it was going to be, and she just is increasingly unfulfilled now that she finally got everything that she wanted and realized it's not everything that she wanted. But you juxtapose that with Louis, and Louis is very much in this phase of like freedom, carefree,
I put that down
independence,
as well.
liberation. And he's like, I'm just doing my thing and y'all are not going to steal my joy. And I love that for him. And I hate that it's not going to last.
I think part of why we're sensing a level of like freedom or a weight lifted off of Louis is that I think this is probably the first time Louis can actually attempt to be his authentic self. He's in a community now, as opposed to New Orleans, where he wasn't able to be sort of open with his queerness, right? Because everybody knows that him and Armand together. And the issue is not that they're gay. The issue is that like Louis isn't following their vampire rules, which that creates a whole set of issues. But that is a refreshing kind of problem for him in comparison.
It don't really bother him.
He's like, I'm kind of cool with it. And then also, I think the world that he was sort of building with the clubs in the stores, I don't think he was in love with that. I don't think that was his passion. I think he was living within an era in a location that was extremely segregated and racism was everywhere. And he saw that as a form of financial freedom to be able to minimize the amount of racism the people that he and the people in his circle were experiencing.
And it means to take care of his family.
Yes. Versus now, the photography stuff, that's just a passion for him. And you can see there is a joyfulness to it where he even admits, like, I am somewhat of just an adequate photographer. And I understand that it can be frustrating because, like, there's limitations to how great I can take pictures because I'm doing it at night, but there's still a passion behind it that I don't think existed for any of the other work Louis was a part of. It feels a little liberating for him.
Yeah. I was very pleased with that. And I was honestly laughing at his just complete indifference to the problems that the Coven had with it.
He's kind of in his Lestat era a little bit.
When you were saying last week how his role to Armand and this Coven is very similar to Lestat's role to that original Coven, I definitely saw that in this episode where it's like, it is sowing discord amongst the Coven, seeing this person live outside of the rules and being allowed to do it. Again, it's like somebody showing them like, oh, there is an alternative to this. And Armand is allowing it for him and not for us. Like, it does kind of, it causes some problems. He is playing a little bit of a Lestat role there.
And he knows.
But he's not trying to. He knows it's happening, but I don't think it's his intent. I think it's just like a byproduct of him doing his thing.
I don't think he is going out of his way to be destructive like Lestat was, but I do think there is some trolling that he's like completely aware of. You know? One thing that I was thinking about, it's something that I have been sort of thinking through, honestly, this entire show so far, is that like, I think sometimes when you see people in Hollywood try to share stories about like just marginalized groups in general, whether it's like a fictional story in sci-fi and fantasy, whatever, I think sometimes too much of their social identity becomes the story itself as opposed to providing them with a lot more depth. The point that I was trying to say is like juxtaposing that to what I see in this story. You have three queer characters, like for sure, with Louis, Lestat, and Armand, but they are writing these characters in a way where they are so fully fleshed out that it's not just their sexuality that they are exploring in the show, which I think is a little refreshing, and it shows that the writers are kind of doing their homework and like what it means, in my opinion, to properly write some of these characters. Because I do think sometimes there's a lot of homophobia surrounding it, but like the idea of, let's say, two gay men, sometimes people don't look at them as humans, but rather who they are attracted to, their desires. And that can be very limiting if you're trying to humanize them through media. But I think what Interview the Vampire is doing is their queerness exists, and obviously it's present in the story, but they are so complex that it's not that I forget, but it's almost like I'm trying to normalize this in a healthy way.
I'm not thinking about them as like gay vampires. They're just vampires who happen to be gay.
Exactly. That's the difference. And I think that sometimes we don't always get that done properly. I think you sent me that TikTok, and it bothered me a little bit too with the Marvels when they shot it out that thing at Michael Rambo of like Black Girl Magic. It's like,
I never watched the movie, but I can't believe that happened in it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like she can be a superhero that happened to be black, but now you've focused so much of her whole identity on her being black that like you've almost like oversimplified her a little bit. And I do feel like sometimes, as someone that always wants to push the boundaries for inclusion, that I don't always have an issue with like race swapping, I think if you solely make a character about their identity, they can feel like a caricature a little bit.
Yeah, they feel one-dimensional.
Yes,
yeah,
and I think
agree.
sometimes people will pick up on that, and it can blur the lines with like who's being racist and who just wants a little bit more of a complicated character. And sometimes I think the comic can get a little blurry. I think Interview with the Vampire, I think, is doing it the most phenomenal way so far.
I definitely agree. I agree because in episode 5, which I'm not going to talk about episode 5, but I did have a moment watching episode 5 where I suddenly just realized, I'm like, bro, like this entire episode has just been about the romantic relationship between 3 men.
Yeah.
I can't recall another time.
I kind of forgot.
Yeah. Number one, I forgot. Like, it was like a realization. I was like, oh, actually, like, the majority of the main characters of this show are not straight people. Right. Which is like one new, like not something that you see very often, but also the fact that I had the realization over halfway through the second season. Yes. Goes to show, it's like a testament to what you're saying, that they've done such a good job weaving it into the story in a way that is authentic.
Right, because like I think sometimes, like I remember like at the end of the second Black Panther where you find out, one of the Dora Milaje, you find out that she's a lesbian, presumptively, because she says my love to that character. It's just kind of thrown in there, you know, and it's like, okay, well, sure, but what else is there that we can explore in her character? There's representation, and I think there's healthy representation of marginalized groups, and I think sometimes it's not always done the greatest. You can tell when it's done
with care.
Yes. Yeah. Because it's not just about representation in the director and the writers. It's about like, are you handling these identities with care and trying to create a healthy normalization of these groups of people?
Well, it's like what they say too about like diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools and in the workplace, where they say it's not just a matter of are there Black people and brown people in the room. Right. It's a matter of what is their experience there. Right. Do they have equal say and equal voice in the things that happen? Mm-hmm. Like all of that is a part of making sure that you're a place that is actually diverse and equitable and inclusive. Yeah. It's not enough to just place them in the vicinity if you're not actually doing it with intentionality.
Right, like the seat at the table isn't enough. Yeah. There's a little bit more to it. But I've thought about it a number of times throughout the season, but I think for some reason it landed a little bit stronger this week for some reason.
It does feel extremely revolutionary. I do need to maybe, I gotta be honest, I'm probably not gonna read these books, but I'm like, maybe I need to rewatch the movie. Like, was the book this gay? I'm like genuinely wondering, like,
I don't know,
because if it was, Anne Rice ahead of her time, okay?
Like, yeah. Well, I've seen book readers in our comment section hold the books in high regard, like, yeah. So I wouldn't put it past her if things like that existed.
In the restaurant, when Louis is talking to Claudia and Santiago starts to mimic him while he is speaking, I think that's another example of a scene that the creators of the show were aware of the racial undertones at play without directly infusing it into the story. Because me watching that guy mimic Louis and then mimic his dialect, and then all of that felt very icky. All of it felt very icky. And I know that his main motivation, like the character's main motivation, is not to be like, ha ha, he he, look at that Black guy who talks like that. Obviously, there was a lot more going on, but it's not irrelevant. And I don't think it's irrelevant to Louis. It just adds to the disrespect.
I think that's another moment where, depending on your lived experience as a viewer, the kind of emotions that it's going to evoke it's just going to vary.
Yeah, it's just going to be different.
I'm sorry. Like, that's just, if you are a person of color and you have seen a white person mimic your accent or mimic your dialect or mimic your language, seeing it on screen in a fictional space, that's still going to remind you of a lived experience. You cannot turn that off.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure, like, is Santiago just racist? Because, like, I can't put my thumb on it.
See, I don't know. I do think, now maybe this is a reach, but when he was like, what does he see in him? He's not even that attractive. I was like, Louis and the photography, when he gets the feedback from that guy and he kind of freaks out. God, I felt really bad for him. I think he misses being human a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that explains his gravitation towards Daniel Malloy later on. I think it explains a lot, his desire to do this interview, all of it. I don't think he's ever really let go of this desire to return to humanity and human civilization and to be a part of it again, because he still sees it as so beautiful.
Yeah. I think I may have seen that scene maybe slightly different, but I think what you're saying is pretty spot on. I think, like, it reminded me a little bit when I was in college, because, I was an English major. And so we had to do a lot of writing and a lot of storytelling. And then we had to have, like, our peers or our professors be the ones to sort of critique it. And I think what made that scene so sad for me and why I felt so bad for Louis in that moment is that, like, putting your art out there is a very extremely vulnerable space to be in. You are essentially compromised because you understand that all of this is extremely subjective and you want people to have good opinions about your art because art is such a very personal thing. It's tied to personalities and characteristics and desires and wants, and it's tied to a plethora of emotions that you're trying to sort of manifest through this medium. To tie with what you're saying, I think he's using photography to tie to his desire for humanity, and I think it's just a really fragile space to be in.
You know what else I think it is too? I think when they're critiquing the art and they're talking about, like, having the eye and, being able to see all of this.
Yeah.
I wonder if he is internalizing his inability to really tap into that as a result of the fact that he's not human anymore. Like, I cannot capture these things with the type of intimacy and vulnerability that I want to, because there's always going to be a boundary between them and me because I just am not one of them anymore. It's like an added sting.
Well, I mean, Daniel, perhaps in Louis' mind, confirms that when he's like, he's lost touch. You don't even understand the meaning of your story anymore. Like, you don't know what it's like to be a human anymore. I think that is that would make a lot of sense to sort of see that.
That's when
like,
he kind of loses it too.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. We can talk a little bit more into this later on. I was hesitant to vilify Armand completely, and I think these two episodes have sort of solidified the fact that, like, Armand is just extremely insecure for a number of reasons, and Louis is not doing a good job of acknowledging that and maybe handling some of those fragile emotions with a little bit more care, and I'll get to a little of that later on. But I do think some of what Armand was trying to portray to Louis is that because he has been around for so long, and the idea that this would be an infinite life for him, I think Armand is trying to display this feel of, like, life being something temporary and finite is how humans can create purpose. Because that's where he's talked about, like, I've lost my purpose. He says it's been 400 years where someone was able to take a picture of me, which is like, that's tied to your legacy, what you leave behind, how people will remember you, how you sort of, leave your mark on the world. And the urgency or the desire, I think, from a human's perspective to want to do that is, like, I'm not going to be here forever. But if you take what I think Armand is saying, a core element to how you find your purpose out of the equation, you're kind of left with, like, an empty hollowness there that I think he's struggling with. When he was about to take out Daniel, he says, the end is the comfort that we long for. And that, I think, summarized the insecurities that he's dealing with. There is a sense of comfort that, like, from a number of things, like, you don't have to deal with this forever. The pain that you're having to endure, you don't have to do this forever. Religious undertones, like, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Like, at some point, this pain will end. It might have been actually Lestat who says the story of vampires is just constant pain. And I think the reality that this is going to go on in perpetuity, I think makes the story just a little bit more tragic.
I was thinking about this in this episode. I truly cannot imagine the hell that would be having your heart broken by somebody, that person disappearing for hundreds of years, you never move on.
Yeah.
You finally do move on and fall in love with another person, only to find out that their ex is the person who broke your heart. That is wicked.
And an ex that they have not gotten over.
That is wicked. That is wicked. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, that would mess somebody up. Part of his story is also that it sounds like he was sort of trafficked.
Yeah.
I think that also explains a lot of his insecurity and why so much of his insecurity is wound up in this idea of self-love and self-worth and being loved by other people and being valued by other people, because to be trafficked and to be used as an object in that way by his maker, if I was following that story, I think I could see how that would just sort of kind of break you down at a fundamental level that he's probably been trying to make up for ever since. And it also explains why he's always in these positions. He puts himself in these positions where he is like a leader, and why he holds so tightly to this power and control and this sense of like adoration from his followers. I think it's a way of kind of coping and making up for all of that. First, I just have to say major props and kudos to the directors of this episode, because the underlying sense of dread that I felt this entire episode as Louis and Daniel were uncovering what actually happened was just extremely palpable. Like and it didn't let up. It was the music, it was the pacing, it was the cuts between the past and the present, all of it. It's like the scene in like a murder mystery or something, when they start to uncover who it really is and all the pieces start to fall into place, and you just feel this sense of like you're getting everything that you wanted, but it feels like so terrible at the same time because of the truth of it. That's exactly how this felt the entire episode. I thought it was masterfully done.
100%. They start to reveal little hints of rage and anger that Armand has, which makes you feel he's a little bit more unpredictable than it was initially let on. And so as it reveals happening, you're like, please get to the bottom of this before he comes back, because I don't know what Armand would do if he catches that you all were on to what he's been up to.
Yeah, I have to say, I have not been scared of Armand at all until this episode. Because we know that all the characterizations of all the characters that we have met in the story so far are through the lens of Louis' memory. But now we also know that Armand has also been messing with his memory. The depiction that we have gotten of Armand so far up until this point was of a person who was fragile, but also seemingly very composed. Very gentle, very loving and caring. And I'm not saying that those things are necessarily false, but I do wonder if either Louis on his own, or perhaps Armand and Louis, Armand through Louis, whatever, was sort of coloring that part of their story differently, or maybe omitting some of those harsher and more intimidating, aggressive, unpredictable aspects of Armand's character. That maybe there was more of that before then.
I think the Malloy scene, that was probably the turning point in their relationship. Power dynamics were sort of shifted a little bit. The reason why I feel that, I think this was a moment where Armand let his insecurities take him to a level of toxicity that he hadn't reached before, and it was a no, you can't turn back from that one. It was a turning point in their relationship. I think what has sort of troubled me with this episode, we talked about this maybe not last episode, but maybe the week before, with like sometimes there is a little bit of bias that some fans have with Louis. I don't know if I can like fully defend him as strongly as I have in previous episodes. Primarily because it felt a little weird that Armand kept calling Louis master. They used a French term for it, but that's essentially what he kept calling him. He's done that twice now, which I do feel it is sort of showing a little bit of a submissive nature that Armand is sort of accepting when it comes to Louis. That's the first part. The second part, the episode 5, I think also showed there is a loud toxicity that Louis has that feels so similar to Lestat. When he's obviously, he's not well, he's on, he's using substances and, whatever. But I do think there was some truth to the fact that he felt Armand was boring, that there wasn't excitement there. And I think as toxic as things were with him and Lestat, it at least helped Louis feel a little bit more alive. It scratched whatever itch that he had of problems that he didn't deal with, and he found that very attractive with Lestat. He's not getting that with Armand, but I think he sticks around because he would prefer to have a rebound than to have no one because he hasn't gotten over with Lestat. And I don't know, man.
So I have a question.
I just felt wrong.
How do you read the scene where Lestat washes away in the rain? Because I kind of took that as him letting go of him.
I interpret that as this is Louis' attempt in trying to do it. But I think what Armand was trying to get at and Louis kept saying, I only spoke about Lestat in a negative way.
But it's like you still talk about him
all the time.
Yeah.
And it's I think what bothers Armand is that you didn't mention me at all.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
It's just how much real estate he takes up in your mind.
Yes.
He's just always so present.
So much capital, so much bandwidth is just about Lestat. When you have that kind of anger or rage toward a person that you were that much in love with, sometimes it can feel a little phony of like you're almost trying to convince yourself as to how much you have like apathy for that person.
Well, it's like what people say, because they're not even trying to convince themselves that it's apathy. They're trying to convince themselves that they hate them.
Yeah.
But it's like what people say that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
Yes.
And that actually like love and hate are two such strong emotions that they are closer connected than you think they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly the dynamic that we see Louis having with Lestat. I think he genuinely believes that he hates him because he has so much fury and anger and rage directed at him and the pain that he caused him. But he cannot untangle that from his obsession and his attachment.
No, I agree.
I don't know what thing is like. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you do.
I don't know either. I don't think I think the writers want us to sit with that uncertainty. I will say, seeing Louis' interactions with Armand and the manipulative nature that comes up reminded me a little bit of scenes that I've seen a little bit with him and Lestat, because there were a lot of moments where Louis knew Lestat couldn't say no to him. Very similarly to like when Louis wants Armand to do something, like he knows Armand will be submissive. Armand wanted to take out Daniel Malloy, and Louis essentially is like, no, I want him to live for a number of reasons. And then Armand then asks like, are you asking me essentially to stop? And Louis says no, which obviously he's trying to like, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, I'm going to need you to let him live. I don't know, bro. I think there is an element where Louis on some level understands that he can get Lestat and Armand to do whatever he wants them to do, because we've seen a number of instances where he not exploits it, but understands the power that he has over them and uses it when he needs something.
And you think he did this with Lestat and with Armand?
I think he did that I think how he convinced him to save Claudia, I think was another one of those examples. I think there were a number of minor moments where Lestat felt like he sort of had his mind made up. And then Louis, gets a little bit more bass and more conviction in his voice. And the facade for Lestat crumbles. His voice gets a little bit soft and he's like, okay, I'll do it. Like that happened a few times in season 1. And now you're seeing with Armand, it's like,
I gotta say though, what is it about Louis? Like what does he have that
he's got the charm,
that's got these people just sprung. Just they cannot. Sorry, it's not funny, but it's like, damn. Twice in a century is kind of crazy.
It just felt icky, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
When Armand called him master in French twice in this episode, I was like, ooh, that's still my name. I'm gonna fuck with it. But still, it's just like, I don't.
That's a very good point. I think I needed that because I'm very pro Louis. I'm very Louis down. I'm very.
And this is not to say Armand and Lestat still they got baggage. Yes. They've done some terrible stuff, but
I think the insidiousness of Louis, though, I think it's one of those situations where he both is on a certain level making it seem as if he doesn't realize what he's doing.
Yes.
And then I think on another level actually doesn't acknowledge or convinces himself that he actually doesn't realize what he's doing. You see this a lot in, like Love Island. Sorry, there is. There's people who may remember. There's a guy on this season of Love Island named Rob, and he kept having these interactions with the women where the woman would be left feeling just so frustrated with him, and he would come across as very like unaware, unintending, and it was so interesting to watch because it's like on one level, I think he genuinely didn't realize truly how he was kind of gaslighting or being a little bit manipulative. And then on another level, it's kind of like, but like you also like are not asking yourself, like you're not like, it's like, it's like two things are true at the same time that feel like they can't be true at the same time. But it's like, there's an unawareness of your behavior and how it's impacting people that I think is real, but it's also like a willful unawareness. Yeah. And I think that is what we see from Louis.
Yes.
And that is also, I think, what makes it hard as a viewer, at least for me personally, to pick up on it, because I was like, poor baby Louis. I mean, the real victim in all of this was poor Daniel. He was the victim. Bro. They essentially just take him and use him as like a proxy for all of the problems in their own relationship. And he just gets stuck in the torture of it all, right? Like you see them use him as a literal punching bag. And I mean, I like what Louis says to Daniel when he's like, rage is an imprecise emotion. And essentially saying like, he was angry with me, but he couldn't hurt me because I was in this horrific state. And so what does he do? He uses you as the outlet for all of that. Yep. And then even the words that they say to him when Armand goes out there and just says that horrible, Jesus. Sorry. Honestly, I would be glad he wiped that from my memory because I would not. That's that type of read that's just like you can't come back from. No jabs, really. Just
I'm just reading facts, bro.
Yes, just a complete takedown of his entire existence. And what's sad is that we know how Daniel's life plays out, and the things that Armand says about him kind of turned out to be true. They're taking all of the pain from all the horrific things that they said to each other, all those horrible things that they just said to each other from all these years of pent-up rage and bitterness and unrequited love and just all the stuff. Then they're just projecting it all onto poor Daniel. I see now why people were on me when I was coming at Daniel before, because if you know this information, it does change a lot. Yeah.
Hey, bro, we are not. We ain't that stubborn to not change our mind. All right. Touche.
Man, oh man.
I guess some shows that are coming back. I don't know if we'll ever want to review it, but Arcane in a few weeks.
No, it really?
Yeah, coming back in a few weeks. Maybe we could like binge season 1 and like do like a brief review on it or something. So there's that.
I'll watch it again. That'd be like my 4th time watching the first season, but I'll watch it all again. Yeah. I love that. I still think that might be one of the best animated shows I've ever watched.
I'd agree.
I'd agree. And I feel like it flew under the radar, and I don't really understand how.
It won awards, didn't it?
Oh, probably. Maybe it did. Yeah. I didn't see people talking about it. I watched it like 2 years late, and I was like, what is this gem I have come across?
Yeah. Andor's coming back. I don't know if we never finished reviewing season 1. We stopped because of the strike.
Oh, yeah.
Severance is coming back, I think in like January.
Stop. Wait, I'm so happy.
Yeah, and then obviously, Last of Us comes back. What I'm the most looking forward to, Daredevil. Essentially, it is season 4. They're trying to do the whole Daredevil Born Again thing, but like it is essentially season 4 for Daredevil because they're kind of carrying similar plot lines. All the actors are back. The people that worked on the show in the previous one, they brought them back. It's like
I'm like tentatively excited. I'm like kind of scared.
Disney, please don't. I'm like
a little bit. I've been a little bit scared like the entire time. Only because when they had Kingpin in Hawkeye.
Well, that's some goofy shit, bro.
Yeah, it was like, dang, like, and I know that this actor knows how to bring it.
I will say, Echo gave me a little bit of hope. Are you going to watch the new Captain America movie?
I don't know yet. I really want to support Anthony Mackie because I don't really like how they've been playing him.
Word, bro.
Did you see the interview that he did? We were talking about Robert Downey Jr. and how he kind of like stole the thunder.
Yeah.
I was like, that's kind of true.
That's a little messed up, bro. I know it's RDJ. Y'all could have waited, or maybe announced the stuff with Captain America earlier to give Mackie his shine a little bit. He's got Harrison Ford in it. I feel like y'all This should be a massively big deal.
Should be a bigger deal. Harrison Ford hasn't been in the others, has he? I just realized that. It does signal that it's like we're not invested in building up the excitement around the new directions that we're taking.
And it just so happens that some of the new directions are people of color and queer people. And putting those two together, I think, is what's making a lot of the discourse online feel kind of icky. And I feel for people, it's like Marvel did drop the ball in quality, but they also seem to drop the ball in quality when they started to put in more representation.
Yeah.
And I think that is frustrating. Appreciate you all for tuning in as always. We love when you all put your thoughts and comments on the episodes or opinions on things that we talk about. We love when you all agree, when you disagree. We accept all of that. We appreciate the Discord, the way that you all have been respectful. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts about these 2 episodes. We watched episodes 4 and 5, right? This in season 2. So let us know in the comments below. And as always, we'd love if you all could like this video, subscribe. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.